You stand on the shore of the ocean watching the tide come in. You sense the call of the sea beckoning to take you further. You step forward little by little, not knowing what to expect, but expecting more. You keep going as the ocean calls you to enter in to deeper waters.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast. I am Nick Peters, your host, seeking to bring you the very best in Christian scholarship and apologetics. And today we're talking about a topic everyone loves to talk about. Because everyone loves the subject, at least that's what my guest says. His name is Bryan Sands, and the name of the book is Everyone Loves Sex. So why wait? A discussion in sexual faithfulness. I mean, is it really important to wait for marriage if everyone loves sex so much? Why would you do that? Now, who is he? He was a youth pastor for 13 years, and he spent the last 6 years serving as director of campus ministries at Hope International University in Fullerton, California. He also blogs regularly at www.everyonelovessex.org. Bryan and his wife Kaz, along with their two daughters Abigail and Lily Rose, live in Orange County, California. So, Bryan, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it.
Well, if my audience doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, wow. Well, I started in the church world I was in the church world for 13 years, and so working with high school students and college students. I worked it's a large church, so I did youth ministry. I oversaw youth ministry. I started the young adults, our fourth worship celebration service at the church that I was at for 13 years. So having been at a church that long, I saw lots of brokenness. I saw lots of hurt. I saw lots of just things that have gone wrong, and I wanted to have a voice in bringing healing and redemption to people who have messed up in this area, specifically of sexuality. And so then getting into the university world and talking with students every single day, and quite often a lot about this topic here, I wanted to bring a different perspective. Because I grew up in the in the 90s and the YWAIT series and all that stuff, and it was good and it had its moment. But I think nowadays, students, millennials in particular, want a more of a holistic approach, and so that's really what started me on this journey of writing this book.
Yeah, I'd like to say something also amusing about this book. That when I got this book in the mail, my review copy, it comes with this great bookmark. It says Everyone Loves Sex, and sex written in big red letters. And I loved it so much, I asked for extra copies of that from you, which you sent. And the thing, it's so amusing because I go out and I have a book with me everywhere just to try and get people's attention. And then I'll leave this bookmark sticking out just prominent enough so everyone can see what it says, just to see if someone will notice. And so far, one person has noticed. Interestingly enough, that one person happened to be my mother-in-law. So that led to some interesting conversations.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Now, Bryan, at the start of your story here, and we do need to go into the story, at the start of it, you, I think, are every guy's hero at the start of your story here. Because apparently you're young, maybe about 14 or 15, and you go up to 6 girls sitting together with a notepad, trying to get a phone number. You walk away with all 6 phone numbers right there. I mean, dude, what's your secret?
The secret was those girls probably didn't have a good upbringing, because there's no way in the world anybody should have been giving me their phone number. I think I was 14 or 15, whatever it was. They literally gave me their phone numbers, and I had a red notepad, and my buddies and I, we would just go up to girls and get phone numbers, and sometimes we would call them and and hang out, and sometimes we wouldn't call them. But for us, it was more of the challenge, and I guess the secret is we were bold and stupid.
So, guys out there, if you are single and you're looking for someone, here's the tip: be bold and be stupid. Follow the advice of Weird Al. Dare to be stupid.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but for as funny as the story is, it's also tragic because you do regret getting those numbers now, don't you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it was, looking back on it, it was a time when I really started rebelling. I'm part of Generation X, and like the man's out to get us. People are against us, and we hate everything, and that was just our whole generation. So we're like, we're going to do whatever we want, whenever we want, and then just ended up, meeting one of those girls that night, and we hooked up, and it wasn't anything spectacular, it was anything magical. It was just a hookup, and that was it. And I think I was so young that I didn't really know how to handle that situation, and so I would just stop talking to her and would her phone calls.
And I understand, unfortunately, for a lot of guys, that's common. For a lot of girls, that's common because both people go into the event wanting different things. Usually, I think a girl is looking for someone who will love her, cherish her, care for her, be committed to her. Like I was looking for sex.
Yeah.
But now, when you write this book, you do want to be clear. Sex is not dirty, shameful, sinful, anything bad.
Absolutely. I think when I was youth pastor, I did this YWAIT series so many years, time and time again. And looking back on some of those messages that I gave, the premise of YWAIT, obviously it makes sense. Obviously I believe it. I still believe it 110%.
Yeah.
But some of the messages I did to communicate why it makes sense to wait, I think did more damage than good. For example, when I was one night, there's probably maybe, 70, 80 high schoolers there, and then the next night 70 and 80 middle schoolers there, something like that. And I did this message about, I got a rose, and I said, look at this rose. And for whatever reason, it was like focusing on girls. And looking back on myself, I want to punch myself for what I did. But the rose, I said, girls, this represents you. And every time you hook up with a guy, every time you do this with a guy, every time you go too far with a guy, it's like you give a part of yourself away. And every example I would get, I would take one of the petals off the rose, and then I'd get to the climax of the story, and I said, look, and what do you have to offer? And, you start hearing sniffles and tears, and you start hearing all that stuff. And it's like, in my mind as a youth pastor, I'm thinking, there's a success. I won. I got this. Like, it's amazing, but now, looking back on it, I realize that was so the opposite of the message of the cross and the message of redemption, because the end goal was, what do you have to offer? You're going to have nothing to offer, so therefore don't mess up. But the point is, what I'm trying to get across in this book here is that there is redemption, and there is hope, and there is love. And so what do you have to offer? You have everything to offer, because God is a God who redeems. And if he wasn't, then we would be in deep trouble.
Yeah, I think a lot of girls get a message like being compared to, say, a chocolate bar. You break off a little piece every time and such. And I mean, I definitely say giving your sexuality away does damage you to some extent, of course, but it doesn't mean that you should go for your life viewing yourself as damaged goods, because you can be redeemed.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, there's definitely consequences of premarital sex. There's consequences of hooking up, all that stuff. And, even the Bible side, like psychologically speaking and sociologically speaking, there's a lot of implications of it. And that's really the first part of the book. But yeah, there's definitely implications to all of that. But you're right, and that's the message I wanted to emphasize and get across on, was that it is never too late to be redeemed. It's never too late to come to the cross and say, you know what, Lord, I need you. And he'll come in with his healing hand, and he definitely can bring healing. Sometimes that might be through a counselor. Sometimes that might be through even divine healing. It just depends on how God wants to move in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I was a student in Bible college, the church I was attending at the time. I went to it one evening, and they were having a silver ring thing ceremony. You know, the true love waits kind of idea and such. So here I am, a single college guy, sitting in the back, and the associate pastor gets up and he starts giving a talk to the young people there. He says, I want you to know, if you all decide to have sex before you get married, you're going to be doing it for selfish reasons. I mean, sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, yeah, I can agree with that. And he said, now you need to think about this. What if you got pregnant? What if you got an STD? Think about the shame and guilt you could feel. Think about what you might have to tell a future spouse on a future wedding night. On, and I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, excuse me, Pastor, but those sound like selfish reasons to me as well.
Oh, good point.
Hardly anything was said about the joy of sex, just a little bit of lip service to it and such. And what I tell people about is, like, here I am, a college guy, sitting in the audience listening to this guy go on, and I am getting bored. And what I tell people is, look, if you are talking about sex and there's a college guy in the audience and he's getting bored, you are doing it wrong. Yes,
right, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you say that, and that's that message. So like that associate pastor of yours, they've given this message, and it's produced this shame culture. You know, don't do it. It's a shame. And now they feel like they have nothing left to give. They feel like there's so much hurt in their lives, and many of them will walk away because they feel like that they're beyond saving. And I think messages like that do way more harm than good. And I definitely wanted to stay away from that shame culture that's been so prevalent over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of it came also with Joshua Harris's book, I Kiss Dating Goodbye. I've heard several people who have been damaged by that book.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is recently I was reading something that Joshua Harris is thinking about recanting from that book. And he's not quite there yet, but he is on the verge from this article I read to recanting it. So that's really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. So fast forward.
His next book. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead about his next book.
I was just joking around saying his next book should be a hug dating hello.
So moving forward today, then, we've heard so many messages about sex being shameful and dirty and such. So let's look up a title here and say, Bryan, do you love sex?
Yes. Simple.
Yeah. And as one who's been married now for 7 years, I agree with you, then. I'm probably like me, guys, and my wife says, that's all you ever think about, isn't it? And I always reply the same way, that I think about many, many other things, like I'm sorry, what was the question again? Now, you know what? We laugh so much, but if there's a new movie that comes out and we want to see it, well, as soon as we have time on the schedule, we have the money, we'll see it. If there's a video game we want to get, as soon as we have the money and we can afford it, we go out there and we get it. If there's a book, we go out there and we get it. I mean, we don't wait for these things. And here you have sex, which we say is so awesome and wonderful. Why should you wait for that?
That is $1 million question. And so here's how I would approach that. So answering that question, I'll give you the general answer, but really the specific answer really depends on the person I'm talking to. Because depending if I'm talking to a millennial, if I'm talking to a baby boomer, if I'm talking to a male or a female. It just really depends. But so generally, here's my general response here. Hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry. Here. My daughter's here, and there you go. Go into the room, sweetheart. Okay. So here's why I think it makes sense to wait. Here's the general answer. Is one, from a biblical perspective, it's God's design for us, and we've seen time and time again throughout scriptures what happens when we go against God's design. We see, heartbreak. We see destruction. We see shame. We see all this stuff that when we go against what God wants. From a psychological perspective, if I'm talking to a psychology student, let's say, or someone who's interested in psychology, I'll talk to them about all of the chemicals that's released during sex. I'll look at, there's vasopressin, there's dopamine, there's estrogen and testosterone, and the big famous one is oxytocin. Mm-hmm. And oxytocin is the cuddle hormone or the love hormone. It's like if all the hormones got together and voted for the best hormone of the year award, oxytocin would win because it creates trust and it creates a bond unlike any others. And so as I look at oxytocin and as I read all these academic peer-reviewed articles about oxytocin and about the power of sex, what oxytocin does, it's released in the deep limbic system part of the brain, and it creates a bond between the partners. And whether it's just a hookup, whether it's just friends with benefits, whether it's whatever the case is, there is a physiological bond that's created during sex, just scientifically speaking. And an interesting part about this hormone oxytocin, it's released, like I said, in the deep limbic system part of the brain. And as scientists have discovered the brain, because they do cool things like that and study the brain and how it functions and how it works, they've learned that this part of the brain in a woman is larger than in a man's. Mm-hmm. So during a sexual encounter, a woman is releasing more of this chemical than in a man. And there's a lot of implications for that. Implications like, why does why does she like stay with that guy who beats her, or why does she? So many implications for that. But if I go back to Genesis, another reason why it makes sense the way, and this is more the holistic approach here, tying in oxytocin with this next thought, is that the Bible says that you'll leave your father and mother, and the two shall become one flesh. And it's a passage I read at every single wedding. I just did a wedding yesterday on the Central Coast, and I read that passage again. But here's what's fascinating about that passage. The word one flesh there. I was having breakfast, and I was having lunch with Trimper Longman, an Old Testament scholar. Yep. And because he wrote a book called God Loves Sex.
Excellent
and
book.
Read it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm like, God Loves Sex? Like, I want to read a book that's titled this, and I read it, and I emailed Trimper, and he got back to me, and he's a scholar of scholars. Like, he's a legend, and he was humble enough and kind enough to get back to me, so I was really appreciative of that. But I told him I read the book, I really appreciate it. I told him about my project. He said, yeah, come on over, we'll have lunch. So over lunch, I was talking about this passage, and here's what he told me. He said, Bryan, he says, this passage, this one flesh, this phrase, this is the only time in the Hebrew scriptures that this phrase is ever used. The only time in the Old Testament one flesh is used like that. And he said that's very significant. And he said the word one is the word echad. Mm-hmm. And it's not just like, one. It's there's a unity within the one. Yep. For example, when the Bible talks about, and all of Israel cried out in one voice. It's not saying that Moses or Joshua or whoever got all the Israelites in a straight line and said, okay, on the count of three, we're all going to, we're going to cry out. No, the idea was that there was unity within that declaration they're making. There's unity within that resolve, whatever the case may be. And so that's the idea with echad here. There's unity within the one. It's similar to the language you use with the Trinity, It's one God revealed in three persons. However we want to figure that. that's a tough topic, but there's unity within the one, and that's the power of a God. Then we have flesh, which is body and flesh and bones, and he says what's going on here is that they're uniting, a bonding of a physical nature, of an emotional nature, and of a spiritual nature. And I think sometimes people leave out the spiritual part, but it's a uniting of a physical, emotional, and a spiritual connection. Now, I was mentioning oxytocin, why it makes sense to wait, but if we think about oxytocin, the way I process it in my mind is that oxytocin is just the scientific way of explaining the best way they could explain one flesh. Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating. The more science discovers things about God, the more there is agreement and understanding. And for me, as I take this holistic approach, as I look at the sciences, and as I look at Scripture, it makes sense that on a holistic level to wait. Now, is it easy to wait? Absolutely not. No. But is it worth it? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree with you on Tremper Longman. He is an excellent scholar. I've read some of his stuff. I'd like to get him on the show sometime. And I have indeed read God Loves Sex, because awesome. Nowadays, if I see most any Christian book on sex, I'll try and pick it up. And hey, this is research that I have to do. You know?
Absolutely.
Suffering for Jesus,
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that there was a time we were visiting some friends, and I was talking to their daughter, who I think is around 18 or so, with them, and she's talking about this guy that she's dating, and says, well, I'm hoping he's going to pop the question soon, but I'm thinking he's not going to. And I was a bit curious. I said, why is it? I said, well, he wants to get financially secure and such, and he wants to travel first. And as soon as I heard that, I said, that strikes me as a concern. I mean, financially secure, finishing school, whichever one it was, that's understandable. I said, when he wants to travel first, that tells me right there, you are not a priority. He wants to do his fun, and then he'll come back to you. And then as we started having a conversation, I started suspecting that, they could be living together or somewhere close, and just gave the best talk that I could, and didn't get any preachy with it, didn't use any Bible or anything, just pointed a couple of facts. Said, look, if you do something like living together and things like that before marriage, you are essentially testing each other. And treating each other as an object. And I said, there was some study that was done asking people who were living together what they thought about the relationship, where they thought it was going. One group answered, oh, we're on the path to marriage, it's not going to be too long, we're getting there. The other group answered, oh yeah, things are going fine. And I said, do you know who is in each group? And she couldn't figure it out. My wife was up here, and she said, okay, here's the answer. The first group was the women who were living together. The second group were the men. And indeed, why should the men marry at that point, because they're getting everything they want already.
Yeah. That's a fascinating study. If you could email that to me, I would love to read that, Nick. That's very fascinating.
If I can find it again.
Yeah, if you can, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. But with all my research, it connects with exactly what you're saying, and that doesn't surprise me. I just think it's amazing that someone actually did that.
Well, I wish I could get into so many young people's lives. What I tell women especially about this is say, women, believe it or not, you control the market here. Because the guys are the go-getters. The guys know what they want, and they're going out and getting it. And every time, whenever you sleep with a man, you're essentially telling him, here's how much I'm worth. I mean, are you worth dinner and a movie, 3 dates, a month, engagement, or are you worth a lifetime commitment?
Yeah. Yeah, and I tell you what, one of the greatest compliments I got was from my wife when she said, she said, Bryan, because you're able to wait, because I made this commitment after I met that girl way back when I was 14, so
Mm-hmm.
25, 30, but I don't know how many years ago it was, a long time ago. And I made this commitment to sexual faithfulness that I'm going to wait. And I did. And at the altar, I was able to cut off the bracelet and give it to her. It was a beautiful moment. And just a great moment. You can see it just at Bryan Kazsan's wedding. It's on BMO, I think. But anyways, she said, I don't have to worry about being compared. I don't have to worry about you cheating on me because you are a man of your word. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's one of the important parts of waiting is it creates more trust among partners. Mm-hmm. It creates more intimacy among partners because it's two people making this commitment and living and following through with that commitment. And that builds trust like none other. Because if we just give into the natural desires, the desires that we have within us, that anybody can do that. But it takes strength, and it takes really a community of people around you to help you stay faithful. And when that happens, your relationship starts off stronger than you ever possibly thought it could be.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there on how the compliments you get can be so good. A couple of years or so ago, my wife and I were invited to New Orleans for the Defend the Faith conference. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting at a table with a bunch of people. One of them is Gary Habermas, who we know very well because he's kind of a man who introduced us to one another. And then he's also...
I read that. You got some great connections like that because I've listened to a lot of Gary's stuff over the years.
Yeah, he's also the guy who married us. And, and so we're sitting there, and somehow talks about marriage comes up. And someone tells us about B.B. Warfield and about how when he was on his honeymoon with his wife, there was an incident with lightning that hit his wife, and she was paralyzed the rest of her life, and he never took care of, and he never stopped taking care of her till the day one of them died. He was there by her side constantly. And so Gary hears and says, so Nicholas, if I happened to Allie, would you do that? And I'm just dealing the headlights right then, immediately. And one of my friends who's sitting at the table says, he absolutely would.
Wow. And great.
I was so thrilled to hear that. I went up to him afterwards privately and I said, I want to thank you for that compliment you gave. And he said, what compliment? And I told him about it. And he said these words. And I've told Al, I said, you know what? When I was at that conference, I got a lot of good compliments on intellect and apologetics and such, didn't I? He said, yes, you did. I said, honey, I cannot remember a single one of them. But I remember this one. And what he said to me was, Nick, you adore Allie, and everyone here can see it. So I tell people, if you compliment me on intellect and such, that's really nice to hear. But it is so good for a man to hear something like, you are really good to your wife.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about sex, I mean, we've heard a lot of good, but there can sadly be a whole lot of pain. And it's not just for girls getting hurt by sex. Guys can get hurt a lot by sex too, can't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Without it, the rumor is that guys don't get hurt and the girls are the only ones who get hurt. But that's not true.
Yeah. You have a story in the book about a guy who, in fact, went out and regularly was pretty much just hooking up with any girl that he could, and it becomes a life of bondage at that point, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think are you referring to Drew's story?
I think so.
Yeah, so Drew, man. I mean, talk about the guy. I mean, Drew and I are buds to this day. And, to him telling me his story was still powerful. He started at a really young age, and even with this older girl, when he must have been 6 or 7 years of age, something like that, maybe 8 or 9. 9 at the latest in terms of at the oldest in terms of his age, but this girl was probably like 5, 6, 7 years older and had his first experience then, and then from there just started this path of, you know, he felt like he had to conquer women and all of that, and he became a sex addict. He would sleep with women, and he told me he wouldn't even go search for them. They would just come to him. Like, he was a good-looking guy. He was caring. You know, on the outside anyways, it seemed like all that, like he had it all together. And he went in the military, he still found women, still sleeping, and would sleep with different women all the time. And from, you know, a non-follower of Christ's perspective, you look at that and go, man, that guy's a stud. He's able to get all those women. What a stud. But as I'm talking to him about this, he's brought me fulfillment. And I think really what he was saying is exactly what you're saying, Nick, is that it created bondage. It created a trap. It created something that to this day he's still working through. He has 2 beautiful kids. He has remarried. And he's working through a lot of this stuff and has come through a lot. He is a leader of Celebrate Recovery because of being a sex addict as well as an alcoholic and drug addict. And he's been sober now from all those things, I think, for 7 years. But the things that we think will bring us happiness and fulfillment and joy, they don't. Like, the world tells us, here's what freedom will give you. And here's what freedom is. Freedom is doing whatever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want. So you want to go sleep with her, you know, go sleep with her. You want to go, you know, sleep with that guy, do that. You want to go sleep with that girl, whatever it is, that's freedom. And then because who are we to tell anybody they can't do anything? Because when we start telling people how to live lives, then we're taking away their freedom. So they think freedom is doing whatever they wanted to do. But that logic kind of breaks down. And my approach to everything, Nick, is way more of a conversation. And I with people, and I talk to so many people who are so far from Christ, and it's fascinating to talk to them and have conversations. And so for the listeners listening, to all your listeners, my encouragement to you first is create relationships with those outside of our Christian culture, and create relationships with those who think differently, and don't just do it to win them as a project. Do it because you genuinely care, and do it because you want to have a conversation and you want to get to know a different perspective, and you'll see God working through you and through your faith. But with the whole freedom idea, you know, like a while back now, I was doing really good with my diet. I was exercising, and man, I was feeling good. I had more energy. I could keep up with the kids better, and I'd wake up in the morning, you know, ready to go. Well, for the most part, still wake up slow in the morning because mornings are just of the devil. But but I mean, I would just be ready to go and ready to make things happen. And I just felt good because working out. And I suppose someone would say, is like, dude, if you want to eat that like bacon cheeseburger, just do it, man. Dude, if you want to go and whatever it is, do it. You know, that's what freedom is. But my response would be, that's not freedom, because if I keep eating those things now, that's going to make me feel lethargic. It's going to make me gain weight back, all the weight that I lost, you know, and really it creates bondage. And what we see in the New Testament is true freedom, and true freedom is when we live according to how we're designed to live. Because in the story, I write about so many different stories of just students of mine, and I work at a Christian university. Students of mine who, quote, lived a life of freedom. There's 2 girls I write about that they had abortions, and they were living together with their partners, and then there's stories of brokenness that comes through all of that. But there's consequences to everything. And freedom, biblical freedom, is when we live how we're designed to live. Because when that happens, when our will aligns with God's will, that's when we start living the life that Jesus talks about in John 10:10, that I've come to give you life and life to the fullest. But what happens is we substitute life with the fullest with all these other counterfeits. And that's really when we get to that part of the conversation, when we're talking to people, is when you got to really start getting underneath the surface. There's always a reason for premarital sex. There's always a reason for drinking. There's always a reason for drugs. There's a reason for these things. And that's the stuff that in relationships that it'd be good to help get underneath the surface of these things, as opposed to focusing on the actual act themselves.
I think it's important when you talk about your friend Drew having a sexual addiction. We need to be clear what that is, because I think there's a lot of wives out there who could say, I think every husband in America has to have a sexual addiction, doesn't he? I mean, what are we talking about?
Yeah, well, first of all, for the wives who say their husband has a sexual addiction, they should be thankful for that because they want it with the wife and not with anybody else.
Yeah.
So sexual addiction, and I'm no expert in this at all, but just from Drew's story, is that he for him, it was a conquest of multiple women and of different women. He always had to have this, and he was always hoping that the next time would bring some type of joy or fulfillment, and it never did. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the difference there, is that for him, it was a conquest. He didn't care if he knew them or didn't know them, as long as he could conquer that and have sex with these different women, all the time. Then for him, it was like it satisfied some hunger within him.
I think what you could say to wives is, if your husband seems to be sex crazed, but he's avoiding sex with other women, and he's avoiding pornography, you probably don't really have to worry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely safe. Yeah. I was talking to my buddy a few months back, and he says him and his wife have sex about every night. I see, you're lying to me, man. Every night? He goes, yeah, at least 6 times a week. And I'm like, and she's cool with that? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, dang, all right.
Yeah, and what's your secret?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But I think what I'd said if I dig into another part of it, because pornography definitely is another damaging way of sex being out there. And it used to be thought pornography was a man's problem, but now there are a lot of women who are viewing pornography as well.
Yep. You look at the stats, and the stats just show continually the rise of women watching pornography. So it's definitely not just a guy's thing. And, maybe it was 70 years ago. I don't know. But what the research is showing now is that women are watching pornography at a high rate as well. And again, with pornography, you got to really ask the question: is why? Mm-hmm. Why are we watching pornography? It's more than just the physical. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, we've got to really consider the damaging effects of pornography, because 20 years ago, if you wanted to watch porn, you had to go and find a magazine somewhere and look at pictures. And it was just pictures. There were no movies, really. Obviously there were movies, but they were very difficult to get. For the most part, the average person, you're going to get a magazine and look at pictures of naked people in the magazine. So that's it. But nowadays, with this fast-paced porn on the internet, that our brains can't keep up with it. And it changes the chemistry of our brains, where it's just nonstop. It just continues and continues to want more. You talk about dopamine. Dopamine is the gotta have it chemical. You see a chocolate cake and that dopamine kicks in. It's like, dude, you got to get that cake. You got to get it right now. And what happens is, when we start watching porn online, the dopamine kicks in. We go, I got to watch it. But then, after watching a certain porn, then your brain is not satisfied, and you got to watch the next level up, and then you got to watch the next level up. Before you know it, you're watching some hardcore, like, destructive. All porn is destructive, but hardcore, like, crazy porn you never thought in a million years you would watch. Why? Because porn is rewiring your brain, and so some people say, well, I just watch it with my spouse, then that's okay, because it's two consenting adults watching it. but it's not, because one is, when you watch porn, you are giving into you're giving into this lie that on the screen it's just two consenting adults or a group of consenting adults having sex, when studies have shown that most of the case that's not the way it is. That there's lots of times there's coercion behind it, lots of times there's drugs behind it, there's lies within that community, there's abuse within that community. When you watch porn, you're supporting that type of behavior. And then we have sex trafficking. A lot of the women that we see on screen there are involved in some form of human trafficking. And more women are coming out saying, this has happened to them, but they didn't even realize that they were being filmed or taped and taken photos of, and all this stuff. So pornography is destructive to the brain, and our brain can rewire. There's actually a great TED Talk on this. Just type TED Talk and porn, and it'll come up. I don't remember who it was. And then, but yet at the same time, we got to understand that what we're watching is not really what we think we're watching, and it's destructive.
I think one of the benefits for men that they see in that is they can get all the benefits of being a man, supposedly, without any of the risk. They don't actually have to, go out there and get a real woman. They just sit there and dial one up.
Yep. Yeah, because with the internet, lady, it's not real. It's fake. It's make believe. It's makes you feel like a stud, and then that's it. But there's nothing real about it.
Yeah. And what so many women, I think, don't understand about it is that when a man feels aroused and such, he really feels like a man, and that's very empowering to him. And that can be bad news when it comes to porn. That can also be good news for women who are married, because no one can make your husband feel like a man like you can.
Yeah.
And even people who don't watch pornography now, they're getting affected by it, because women, especially, are being told to do more and more things, because the guys in their lives are so caught up in porn that regular dating stuff and such just doesn't interest them.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I've even heard of stories of men who when they're even with their own wives, they have to have a porn magazine nearby because they can't get aroused anymore just by their wife's body.
Yep, and that goes back to the dopamine and to how watching porn changes our lives and changes the actual chemistry of the brain. It does major damage to our brain, and most of the time people aren't aware of it. What's interesting is that researchers wanted to study the effects of pornography on that what it has on romantic relationships, and so they did like 5 different studies, and the first 3 studies demonstrated that pornography consumption is related to weakened commitment to a partner. So somebody watching porn, their commitment to their other significant other is weakened. Study 4 demonstrates that the more pornography one watches, the more likely one is to look into a different romantic relationship, saying, hey, that person over there, I like to experiment and do different things with that person. And then the 5th and the final study showed that there's an association between pornography consumption and being physically unfaithful to one's partner. And this is just a scientific study that I forget what university it was done at, but it just shows you like how devastating this stuff is.
And it's not a shock that so many men who do this can also turn out to be rapists and such eventually, because the women at that point are just objects. And when I meet men who are using pornography and they're married and I know them well, I say, look, what you're doing every time you do that is you're sending a message to your wife if she finds out saying you are inadequate. you are not enough to satisfy me.
Yep. And I think that's a great point. Just the hurt that comes along with it when one partner is watching and the other one finds out. There's a betrayal there. There's a hurt there. There's a distrust that happens. And for the guys and women who are listening to this, if you're watching pornography and you just can't stop, and you see the negative effects it's having on your life, please see a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
A good website to go to is aacc.net, American Association of Christian Counselors,
mm-hmm.
aacc.net, and there you'll find top quality Christian counselors, and you can find counselors who specialize in this area. And don't be ashamed to go talk to a counselor, because you need to get help. Don't keep this hidden, because the more you keep it hidden, the more power it's going to have over you. And the more power it's going to have over you, the more your life is going to go down the tubes, the more your life's going to be out of control. But when you allow things to come into the light, that's when you really give the Holy Spirit an opportunity to start working in and through your life. He's not going to force himself on you to bring healing, but you've got to take that first step to say, yes, I need some healing because I am struggling in this area here, and talk to a professional counselor, because they're trained in helping you through this.
Yeah, I don't remember you mentioning this in the book, but I know many single guys come to me and they want to say, I don't do porn and such, but I am home to get married, but right now I struggle. Should I be concerned about masturbation?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to a guy like that?
I always just go back to the Sermon on the Mount. If you ever have Trimper on your show, ask him about that, because he has a totally different take on it, which is very fascinating. I go back to the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is there, and he says, even if you think it, it's like you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, does every college guy do it? Yeah, most of them. But as followers of Jesus, it's not easy following what Jesus wants us to do. It's not the easiest. It is challenging at times. It's mostly challenging because he calls us to a higher standard. And so if we're committed to really following Christ, let's read the Sermon on the Mount, and let's read and learn the life of Christ, and try to let our life honor the life of Jesus, because he is our Savior. And so when that happens, then we start the fancy Bible word is sanctification, and becoming more like him. It doesn't mean we won't suffer, or it doesn't mean we won't stumble, but it means that we really want to live the standard that Christ has called us to. So in terms of masturbation, I think Jesus is pretty clear. If you think of it, then you do it. That's my quick answer. There's way more to it than that. But Trimper Longman is way better at explaining this topic than I am.
Yeah, well, I would like some clarification on this point, because what if a guy does ask her out, on some level he is thinking it, usually for the most part and such. And we don't want to say thinking about sex is automatically wrong. In fact, when you go to premarital counseling, you're encouraged to think about and discuss sex. So when do you think it becomes a problem?
I think thinking about it and then having this unhealthy lust is, I think, the distinction. Because, without a doubt, in premarital counseling, lots of times you do talk about the physical act of sex and all of that. And just if I could take a quick step back, is that sex is good. Like sex, God's design for us, from the very beginning. It is a gift that God has given us that we are to celebrate and that we are to honor. And part of getting a gift is you want to honor that gift. So how do we honor the gift of sex is we use it within its proper context. And so that's just something important for us to understand, that this is a wonderful gift. And I think part of life, this journey of life that we're on, is just figuring out how do we navigate life, and how do we navigate what our lives look like, and how we honor God. And so I think I backtracked too far because I forgot my train of thought, Nick.
It was about thinking about sex before marriage and such.
Oh, yeah. So thinking about it, yeah, I mean, yeah, thinking about it is just what you do. I think when it comes to lust and of a conquering, and when we start treating those thoughts, they start becoming, the other person, I think, starts becoming more like an object than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think the thinking to the lust is that distinction for me, and and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, anyways.
Mm-hmm. Tell us, because we've already talked a little bit about Drew and my story about a guy getting damaged by sex. How about Maddie?
Yeah, yeah. Maddie, another one of the students at Hope, and she was betrayed, and so Maddie came to my office, or no, I mean, well, yeah, to my office, and then she met with my wife and me just to tell her story, and she met this guy, and they dated for like 5 years, and like the first 3 years they didn't even. The first 3 years they didn't even have sex or anything, but when she turned 18, she said, "Oh, I'm an adult now." She saw all her friends were kind of having sex, and she felt like she did the responsible thing. And then her and her boyfriend, I think I named him Enrique, if I remember right in there.
Yes.
Okay. Because you got to change everyone's names. So Enrique, they had similar backgrounds where there were some broken homes. Their parents remarried. They were the oldest ones in the family. They had all these connections, and so at 18, they both made a decision. Hey, let's have sex. Bam. So they did it, and then shortly after that, there was conflict at home for other reasons. And then Maddie was then kicked out, moved in with her boyfriend. They moved in together and they did all of that. And so after they moved in, things were good for a while. But then he started getting just kind of distant, kind of talking to this other girl, kind of just getting uninterested in her. And then shortly after that, she takes a pregnancy test and it's positive, and she tells him about it, and he didn't respond the best. He basically just said, "Well, do whatever you want with it. Like, I don't care. I don't want to be a part of raising this child." And so anyway, so long story short, she ended up having an abortion, and he wasn't really supportive the entire time. And it just, and hearing that story when she told it to us, must have been a couple years ago now, it just heart-wrenching, because here she is trying to do what's right, trying to think she was an adult, but but she did love the Lord, but she just kind of got consumed with living with this guy. And then when this came, she had an abortion, and then she had to work through all of that. And to this day, because I still know her, I still think she's working through some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think really went wrong in the story? Because the couple, they're dating for a while, they have sex, then things go down here. And what differentiates from, say, your story can be like mine. My wife and I, we didn't even live together or anything. We dated, then we get married, then we have sex, and things work out fine. So, what's the difference about sex when you wait till after you get married than before you get married?
Yeah, I would say, well, if one thing is, I don't want to communicate if people do have sex that they can't have a fulfilling, exciting life, because they can't. And I mean that's not ideal, but many people make it work, and all that. But that's not the best case scenario.
Right.
I think sometimes what happens is we're not ready for it yet, and when you're not ready for something, and you engage in something, you don't really know how you're going to respond or how you're going to react to it. In this situation, I think it was just a volatile relationship from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just destructive, and maybe they thought sex would bring healing, sex would bring them closer together. So there's so much more underneath the surface that's going on with all of that. And so they made the jump. They started having sex. They moved in together, and then she got pregnant, and then she had the abortion. But so I think there's many factors that played into it. The best case scenario, and by the way, with Maddie, God has definitely done an amazing work in her life, and just seeing her, what God has done in her life is amazing, and redemption and what she's doing now, it's great. But the best case scenario is to wait, is to live for God. But just if we live for God and we do what's right in this relationship, in a relationship, it doesn't mean that marriage is going to be successful. I think you're setting yourself up for success, but it doesn't mean it necessarily will be successful, because regardless of when you get married, or regardless when you're in a relationship, you both have got to be committed to make it work. And if you're both not committed to making it work, the marriage is not going to work. And it's the same thing when you're dating. If both people aren't committed to being sexually faithful, chances are you're not going to be sexually faithful, because there will be times when one has to be strong and the other has to be strong, because one will be weak, and then one has to be strong, and vice versa, and all that stuff. Yeah, so obviously the best case scenario is to wait, because I think it creates trust, it creates empathy with one another. It creates a relationship where you focus more on the emotional relationship than the physical relationship. And then when you get married, it's like the culmination of all of that, and you get to express all of that in sex. That's the ideal situation. But even in the ideal situation, things fall apart and break apart because we live in a sinful world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, my wife and I celebrated 7 years just last month together.
Yeah, us too.
Yeah.
We just celebrated 7 years as well.
Yeah, I think our weddings were extremely close. When was your wedding again?
June 18th.
You were just about a month before us. Ours was on July 24th.
Oh, that's great.
And so, it takes hard work and sacrifice. I mean, as I've told her, I said, I don't understand it somehow. Some nights we can go to bed and we've had a big fight or something, and we are furious with one another.
Yeah.
And then the next morning we can wake up and we can be all lovey-dovey with one another. And such. I said, that makes no sense whatsoever to me, but it happens. And I also tell guys, really, something better. We often complain about how women don't give sex enough and such. Guys, you also have to be doing your part and strive to be as romantic as possible.
Yes.
Now, with these kinds of stories here, like Maddie's, it is important that we can hear all these negatives and think that everything is so dark and gloomy, but we really need to look at the positives too. I mean, what are the positives about sex?
Positives of sex. I mean, one is it's like it's a physical expression of your love. It is a chance to reunite and to be the closest to someone you absolutely love, and that no one. Then ideally, this is the best case scenario. This is the closest you'll be to anybody in the entire universe.
Yeah,
and you get to share that with one person, and that's the only person you get to share it with, and that is exciting, and it's to be celebrated. Sex creates just this amazing euphoric feeling that just brings two souls together, it's a way to honor God. Actually, we're using God's gift that He's given us, and sex is a way to honor the Lord. And Song of Songs talks a lot about that idea. But yeah, sex is just a physical expression of love, and it comes with so much joy and so much love and so much excitement and bonding, that it's truly just a way to say thank you, God, for this wonderful gift that we can express our love physically for one another. And for the listeners, if you're saying, man, like, because a lot of people have been hurt by sex. Right. They've been hurt, they've been sexually abused, they've been sexually molested, maybe sexually violated, maybe sexually toyed with, teased, whatever it is, and they might be listening and saying, this is all hogwash. What the insert bunch of curse words here are you talking about? And my hope for you is this here, is understand that there is the ideal, and then there's the reality. The reality is that we are all sinful, and that the people who hurt you, I am so sorry for that, because that is never what God intended. People that brought harm and hurt and issues, I mean, that's never what God intended. And my heart really does go out to you. And I did some videos on my YouTube channel, if you want to check them out. Talks a little bit about some of these topics here. But for those of you in this category, understand this, that you can get through this. You can you can thrive. You don't always have to be a victim. And there are people and groups and organizations and there's communities out there that will help you thrive through this. And as you get stronger and as you start healing yourself, you're going to be in a position to start helping and healing others and helping put an end to these atrocities, put an end to these evil acts, because this should never have happened. And I'm sorry that it did happen. So there is the ideal and there is the reality. The ideal is everything I just talked about, and it's a gift from the Lord. But what happens is, the reality is, people abuse that gift all the time.
Yeah. I often tell young men who are getting ready to get married and such, because I'll try and talk with them about sex, because I had a guy who was willing to come alongside me and talk with me and give me the advice I needed, and it really helped out. So I try and be there for other guys, and I'll ask them before we get married. I said, okay, now, you really do love her now, don't you? He said, yes, I do. I said, okay, I'm going to tell you two things here about it. First off, I absolutely believe you, and I agree with you. You really do love her. That's true. Second thing, you really don't have a clue right now, either. Says, look, once you get married and sex enters a picture, it really does change everything. It brings love up to a whole new level. And I can say, when someone goes after my princess, that it fills me with the greatest rage that I can imagine, like nothing else ever has, because we just share that unique bond together. And when I talk about sex with people, I hesitate to use a word because it can sound so corny and such, but it's something magical. I just can't explain it anymore. I mean, I've even got a book here on my shelf with written by a pastor and his wife, and I've been tempted to try this for a few times, but he says, if an atheist ever comes to you and wants proof that God exists, you just answer one word: sex.
That's the new wave of apologetics.
I've been tempted to use that a few times just to see how it would work.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of it also is because if we're going to understand how good sex is, we need to understand how good we are. And I don't mean how good we are in the bedroom and such, but our value as human beings, because we can make a mistake if we come to sex thinking sex will give us value.
Yeah.
And I don't think sex will give anything new that's not there. It will instead increase whatever is already there. And if we've got negativity and such in distrust already, it could in fact increase that.
Yeah.
So, what are we worth?
Well, I think an idea of worth, if it wasn't for the cross, we wouldn't be worth anything. So we are worth everything because of that sacrifice that Christ made for us, and that's the type of love we need to have for others, is to serve and sacrifice ourselves for others. And when that happens, I think we start seeing a revolution. So, sometimes I think people think they're not worthy, so they might as well just give themselves to others. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because Jesus wants to bring you redemption and healing so desperately. And so do whatever you can to reach out to him and say, Lord, I need you, because you are worth dying for. Everyone is worth dying for. And so the person listening who thinks they're worth nothing, say, no, you're worth so much that Jesus died for you and changed the entire universe for you.
My wife had someone who was a longtime friend of hers, about a decade or such, and I'm not sure if you've seen on my Facebook, but except for Sunday, every day of the week, I post a message about how I love my wife, and I post a marriage meme there.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
And one day I posted something about every woman being worth a lifetime commitment. So you don't need to sell yourself out before you get married. You need to save sex because you are better than that. You are worth more than that. And one of her friends who wasn't doing that got angry with her and was saying, see, your husband, he thinks I'm not worth anything. He thinks I'm just a slut. And things like that. No, he's not saying that at all. And she said, look, I've been married to him for all these years. I think I know what he means better than you do. You've only met him twice, but in the end, this other person cut off a friendship because they didn't like that. And it was so hard because she'd asked me, how much do you think I'm worth? I said, I will tell you exactly what the medieval philosopher said. Every single human being alive is worth more than the entire universe. That is how much you are worth.
Yeah. That's great.
Now, one story you have in there about how much people are worth is the story of Brooklyn.
Yes.
We don't mean the city here. We mean a person. So, what's her story?
Oh, Brooklyn story. Goodness gracious. I'm trying to think because I get there's so many different stories. I get them mixed up with some of the other ones. Let's see here. Actually, I'm trying to. Okay. Yeah, there it is. So if anything could go wrong, it did go wrong in her life. Yes, that's right. When she was in 6th grade, Brooklyn's grandmother passed away, and everything. Like after that moment just changed. Brooklyn's mom became depressed. She turned to drugs in order to cope with it. And then Brooklyn's stepdad continued in his alcoholic ways. And so it was like a volatile situation. And so her mom would sneak out late at night to go to this drug dealer who lived next door. They'd get high and they'd hook up and they would do all that stuff. And so this happened for months and months and months. Brooklyn's mom would leave. Her stepdad was there. Asleep, she would hook up with Brooklyn's mom would hook up with the neighbor, the drug dealer, and then all that stuff. Then what ended up happening is Brooklyn would one night would stay, have a sleepover. It'd be Brooklyn, her friends, and all that stuff, and her friend's brother, and they were all sleeping in one bed. They're just young kids, so 4 or 5 in one bed. And then with Brooklyn, what happened was that this boy, her mom's best friend's son, was molesting her, and And what happened was that the next morning she woke up. She went to the bathroom right when she found out, and just kind of like hid away, and never really like dealt with it. Just kind of like left it as it was. Then I don't know if this next part of the story happened before or after that, but what happened was the dad finally caught Brooklyn's mom cheating, and so when she came. Then the drug dealer neighbor, what happened was he was over at the house one day because they figured that he didn't know. But Brooklyn's dad just beat this guy to a living pulp, bloody, broke some ribs and all that stuff. And the kids were all there watching it, young kids and all that. And he just about killed this guy, like almost beat him to death. Mm-hmm. So then Brooklyn gets molested, and she tells her mom. Her mom doesn't believe her, and her mom doesn't want to tell her best friend because she doesn't want to lose a best friend. So her mom just sweeps it under the rug. Her stepdad is out of the picture by this time because he wants nothing to do with them. And so here she is thinking she has no value, no worth, no anything. Just absolutely thinks she is worthless and has nothing to offer. She did confront the boy and even told the boy's dad and mom. And the dad says, "Well, look at how you dress. No wonder this happened to you."
Oh, gosh.
And the mom said, no, I don't believe you. He wouldn't do that. And so right away you have this denial. You have these denials going on. And you have the dad saying, "Look at you, you brought this upon yourself," which is so insensitive, so wrong, so ignorant,
so common, sadly.
Yes, and so common. Yeah, it's sad. Absolutely, it's so sad how common it is, and so she just had to live with that, and she just had to deal with it. And it wasn't until maybe 10 years after that event or so that he actually came clean and said, "Hey, I'm sorry that this happened. My dad did this to me," and she forgave him, and she wanted to move on, and she wanted this to no longer be controlling her, and so she was able to get to the point where she forgave him. And it's a pretty remarkable story of everything that she's been through. Because she after that she was with one guy, then another guy, and it's just not working out. But yet, sleeping with them and all this sorts of stuff. So
and she was volunteering at youth centers at the same time too.
Yeah, she was volunteering at a youth center at the same time. I think at either a youth center or at her youth group. And so she was trying to do what's right, but yet she'd always go back to her old ways. And I think the molestation plays into it. I think her upbringing with the dysfunctional mom and dysfunctional stepdad and her biological dad not in the picture, I think that all plays into it. And then, again, she met this guy, met the guy, thought he was good, got her pregnant, and she tells him, and he says, like, "What do you want me to do?" Like, like I don't care what you do with it. I'm not going to take care of it. And so, once again, here's another case of a guy getting a girl pregnant, wanting nothing to do with her or with the child, and then saying, "I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore." And so she ended up getting the abortion. And in the book, I talk about kind of the details of the abortion, and it's devastating, the whole abortion process. And it's just, once again, it's this gift that God gives us that when it's abused and when it's not used in its proper context, there's all these consequences that follow because of it.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things to stress also in the story is the importance of, and I know people who have been abused don't really want to hear this, but it is essential, and that's the importance of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. I think we could say it's practically impossible to move past abuse like that without being capable of forgiving.
Yeah, it's forgiveness is everything, and for those who are abused who are listening, definitely it is. I mean, if this just happened, I mean, give yourself time.
Yeah.
It definitely is a process, and this is something to work through with your friends, with your counselor, to really help you get to that point. Because, and for whatever reason, if we can't forgive someone, whether it's abuse, whether they hurt us, offended us, whether they stole from us, we are still giving them power. And that's something that Jesus, when he died for us and he forgave us, he broke the power of sin, broke the power of death. And on a smaller scale, that's what happens when we forgive. We break the power someone has over us.
A couple of years ago, my wife got hurt by someone very bad who at the time I considered a friend and such, and it was one of the most painful experiences I've seen, because I saw her go from one of the best places ever in her life to one of the worst because of what this person did. And it took me the longest time to be able to forgive. I ended up calling a really good friend of mine, and he helped me through the whole issue. And if anyone's interested, one of the things I think helped me get past it was, instead of having anger for a person, I ended up pitying him instead.
Yeah.
Because he'd had a chance to do so much good, and he blew it instead. And he'd never get to know the joy of seeing my wife happy because of his actions. And it took a long time, because, I mean, and Harry would ask me, she'd say, well, what kind of things were you thinking at first? I'd say, oh, you do not want to know what kind of things I was thinking at first.
Right, yeah.
What would you say to someone out there listening whose story is, I mean, none of them are exactly like, but someone whose story is like Brooklyn's?
I would say that life is a journey, and you just happen to be on this journey where life has just knocked you down really, really hard. And Brooklyn even remembered, she even told me one day that, like, no wonder people here's what she said, no wonder people treat me bad. I was molested. I was been with all these different guys. I had an abortion. I'm not worth anything. And, that was from just her heart and this darkness that she was in for so long. So if you have a story like Brooklyn's where maybe you brought the decisions on yourself, maybe you didn't, whatever the case, it doesn't matter. You are still loved. Do not believe in the lie that says you are not worthy. Don't believe the lie that says you are not valuable, because you are. And also understand, please understand that it doesn't have to always be this way. It doesn't. You don't have to stay in this darkness and this dark depression. And there's seasons of life, and you might be in this season of darkness. But even in this season, reach out to a close friend, reach out to a counselor, reach out to a pastor who knows what they're talking about. Reach out to, trusted people who could help you through this process, because in the books, you'll read these stories of women who, these young girls, and they're, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and just living in these dark times. But yet the great thing about the stories in the book here is that you get to see kind of where they are now. And that's the exciting part. So if you're in this dark time, do all you can to reach out to some caring people around you.
Yeah, I lost track of time with because we are having such a good conversation on this topic that I need to do two things at once here. One of them I normally do at a halfway point. I'd like to remind everyone that you're listening to the Deeper Waters podcast. We're talking with Bryan Sands about his book, Everyone Loves Sex, so why wait? But if you're here next week, we're going to be talking about Christology again, and my guest is going to be the great Australian Bible scholar Dr. Michael Bird coming on, talking about his book, Jesus the Eternal Son. We're going to be answering the claims of adoptionism. Now, I'd also like to let you know that when you're listening to Deeper Waters podcast, everything we do here is supported by listeners like you. I don't get paid for me to do anything like this. I don't pay my guests. I just get the books, I read them, and I review them, and I have them come on. But if you'd like to support us in this, go to my website, deeperwatersapologetics.com, and there's a link inside there that says Help Support the Work of Deeper Waters Christian Ministries. And when you click on what's in there, it takes you to Risen Jesus. You've gone to the right place. That's the ministry of my in-laws, Mike and Debbie Lacona. And you go there and you make your donation, and then you get in touch with me or Mike or Debbie or Ari and say, hey, I made a donation. I want to go to Nick Peters. I want to go to Deeper Waters. And they'll make sure we get that donation. It will be tax deductible. And you can also buy ebooks that I've written, such as A Creed for the Ages, The Apostles' Creed in Today's Christian, or co-written, such as Defining Inerrancy, or Groundless, or God and Natural Disasters. And actually, guys, we've talked some about romance. Now, something you might not have caught on, because let's face it, we guys are slow with romance. You might not have caught on that women like jewelry. Well, we actually have a jewelry store at Deeper Waters. It's ran by my friend Lena Klester with Premier Jewelers. And you access the jewelry store through us. If you need help doing that, get in touch with me. I'll tell you how. And you can buy some jewelry for that lady in your life. And whatever you buy, 25% of what you buy will go to Deeper Waters. So, guys, you can buy something, and you can give it to that lady in your life to make up for that big screw-up that you recently did. Or you can buy some for that lady in your life to make up for that big screw-up that I know you're going to make in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bryan, do you have an organization you'd like to see people donate to?
Yeah, one of the organizations we're heavily connected with is called Amor Ministries, AMOR, Amor Ministries. And we've been teamed up with them for many, many years, and we go down to Mexico probably 6 times a year with them. And this organization started by Gayla and Scott Congdon, and about 35, almost 40 years ago now. And they're actually alumni of Hope International University, where I'm the campus pastor. And over those years, they built over 20,000 homes. They have built over 400 churches. And they're doing phenomenal work for the kingdom, and they work closely with the local pastors in the communities of Tecate and Tijuana, as well as in communities in the Yucatan Peninsula. And there's amazing things going on. So if you want to support and donate, just go to amor.org, AMOR.org, and you could donate to them as well. It's a phenomenal missions organization.
You know, you've got a chapter in the book also about sex and love together, and it makes me think of something that Sheila Ray Gregor of To Love, Honor, and Vacuum has on her site, where she says, I know many, many couples that have had sex, but not many of them have made love.
Yeah.
What is the difference between sex and love?
Yeah, I think the quick, simple answer is that, you know, you'll know like when you experience it.
Mm-hmm.
Sex obviously is just the physical. It's just the physical bonding of two people within that. Lots of times there's sex and there's no love. It's just for physical fulfillment and all of that. But when you have sex and you have love, I mean, you have this unconditional love where no matter what you do, what you look like, whatever, I'm going to love you regardless. The type of love that actually follows through with the vows we made on our wedding day. When that is coupled with sex, then it is that beautiful euphoric experience we were talking about. When it's just the physical and just the sex, it misses out on so much. Because people think, oh, they have the best sex. You have to have the supermodel people, the bodybuilders, whatever it is. But no, I would contend that the best sex comes in a committed relationship with two people who absolutely love one another. And that's where true fulfillment comes from. The looks is just physical, it's just surface. And what love does is it gets beyond all that and gets down to a deep emotional part of the soul that you can only get at when there's absolute love between the two people.
Yeah, I often get very, very amazed when I think about it, because, I mean, you can't see me on a webcam, but if you could, I'm a guy who's like this 115, 120 pound scrawny little weakling here, and such. And I go laughing, no chance whatsoever, not gonna happen, even though I really want it to. And somehow my wife came to see something different in me. And although she would tell you when she first saw my picture on Facebook, she thought, oh my gosh, what a total nerd. Of course, I take that as a compliment. But all I know is that, I don't have to understand, but somehow she likes what she sees, and that gives me a total great, wonderful freedom around her. There is no shame whatsoever. Now, if I could get a chance, would I love to look better? Heck yeah, of course I would. But it really doesn't matter that much in the long run. I mean, what matters is that commitment is already there. And the sex is just the further cementing and the acting out that commitment. I think one of the great dangers of our age is we have reduced sex to just a physical act and just something couples do to have fun.
Yeah.
And such. And it's so much more. I mean, it is a physical act, it is fun, but it's more.
Absolutely. So much more.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what do you think is being missed entirely? I mean, if you watch sitcoms and such today, it seems natural when, you just love one another and you just start sleeping together. And interesting, many times you can be sleeping together before you really know if you love each other or not, which makes no sense to me.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that's missing is consequences. It's you could have this and there's no emotional consequences, there's no physical consequences. It's just the next episode starts and then that's it. And it happens all the time. But in real life experience, everyone knows there's consequences to these actions. And so I'm not saying don't watch that stuff or anything like that. I'm just saying as you watch those things, just keep the filter on that, they're missing out on some of that stuff. And if you're parents and your kids are, at an appropriate age, whatever age that is for you guys, don't be afraid to watch these things with your kids. Actually watch it with them and talk to them about what you just watched. Mm-hmm. Talk to them about the good stuff and the bad stuff in it, and help teach them to kind of filter what they see through the lens of Christ. And as opposed to being afraid of it, let's engage our culture because this is where we live right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people don't realize that the consequences are big, because whenever sex happens, it really does change everything. I mean, I know for sure my and Ari's relationship was never the same once that happened, because it's really, in many ways, the greatest kind of trust you can give someone, that you have your bodies connect with one another together, and there is absolutely nothing hidden whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you have a chapter in here then also about how much is your selfie worth? Are you talking about taking a picture and selling it on eBay, or what exactly?
Yeah, it depends on yeah, who wants to buy that picture. Yeah, so the whole idea of the selfie chapter, and I really love this chapter because actually a little background to it is I had focus groups with college students. I'd have these focus groups talking to them about the content of the book, the material, all the research I was doing, and so they really helped shape and refine the book a bit. So I'm thankful to all the students who were a part of that, and a lot of them I mentioned in the book there. But one of the students that helped me with this chapter, this idea, the selfie chapter, was a great guy. His name is Matt, and that's his real name. And the idea is this here is that we take pictures. We put filters on them. We get the right angle. We'll take 20 to 30 photos, the same pose, just to get that one photo that we really like, and then we'll get that filter to make us look really good, strong, and make us look thinner, make us look stronger, make us look whatever. We'll hide our quote unquote flaws. And then we post it on there, and we get all these likes, and go, yeah, look at us, look how great we are. And the idea of the selfie chapter is that that's not who we are. We're not the person who have those filters on. We are flawed. And the challenge of this chapter is to realize that community is so important. Community is everything, because within community, we can't put these filters on. Within community, we can't put these... there's so many things we can't get away with, because these are our friends, our family, who they really know who we are. And in authentic community, no filters are allowed, because that's not who you really are. And when we are in authentic community, like how God designed, and like how we see in the early days of the church how important community was, we are able to really understand who we are in the eyes of God. God has put people around us, a family of believers around us, to encourage us, to build us up. And when we do that, when we live in community, we're almost forced to live an authentic life. But with that comes more freedom, because when we try to post pictures with filters and try to portray things that we're not, that's so surface level. But what community does, it gets underneath the surface.
So what does that have to do with sex?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. The idea is this here, is that if we are going to, in terms of community, we need a community around us to help us in this journey of life, because when we just kind of go off on our own and try to find fulfillment on our own, lots of times we'll go and seek the sexual encounter. Lots of times we'll go and we'll seek seek drugs or over drinking or whatever it is, because we want to be fulfilled. And lots of times that fulfillment does come in these sexual encounters. But the idea of the selfie, of the community, is that it is so much more than that. And if we want to be faithful to God, we've got to surround ourselves in a healthy community to help us grow, to help us mature, because in essence, that's how we're created, that's how we're designed, that's how we're made. We're made for connection, we're made for intimacy. That's how we're wired. And when we're in these healthy communities, it gives us strength and endurance to live the life He has called us to live a life of sexualness, to live a life of holiness, to live a life of sanctification, whatever phrase you want to use in there. We're able to do that through community. And in that chapter, I tell this story of a great case of one of the best instances I saw of community was at an AA meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I had the honor to go and watch one of my former students named Elaine go and receive her 4-year sobriety chip, and it was such an honor to go and be a part of that. So I went, and one of the administrators of the university went with me, and because he was invited as well, and to see the community there, the trust they had with one another, was something I've never seen before, and it blew my mind because I've been in the church for a long time now, but when I saw this community, I've never seen anything like it in the church before. And so I think, one of the reasons with the chapter was to encourage us as the church to step up our game, and to be brothers and sisters, true brothers and sisters, to those that we know, to those who are around us. I wanted to encourage us to be the hands and feet of Christ here on earth as we're living in this world here. And I wanted to challenge people in this chapter that within community, we really help figure out what we want in life. We really have a support system to take us to the next level. We really have a group of men and women who could show us what life really could be. And when we have those components in, it's just amazing what God can do in and through us.
Now, with about 20 minutes or so left for our interview, we really need to go to a very dark side of a story, but this one has to be brought out, and these are stories of people like Teresa and Anna that you write about in the book, and that's the dark world of sex trafficking.
Yep. Yeah, Teresa's story began when she was 15. She grew up in an upper middle class suburb in Detroit. And she was a sophomore in high school. And she's going to high school, and there was these older guys, there were these seniors in high school, so they were 12th graders, she was 10th graders. Of course, she was taken by them because they're older guys, they could drive, and she thought they were handsome. Over the course of a semester or so, they started getting to know her, started talking to her, chatting with her, befriending her. Well, this went on for some time, like a semester or so, and then one day she was walking home, and one of the guys was like, "Hey, do you want to ride home?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I'd love a ride home." And then he doesn't go to her house. He ends up taking her to his place, or his parents' place, or whatever the situation was there. And she goes, "Oh, no, my house is down the street." He says, "Oh, no, I know. I just come hang out with us. We're just hanging out for a little bit. And just come on in and just have a drink with us, and then I'll take you home. But it's just fun hanging out with you," that type of deal. And these yellow flags and red flags start going off in her mind. But she felt coerced to do it. And so they went inside, and they gave her a drink, a Coca-Cola, but they put something in it where she drank it, and she was incapacitated. And while she's incapacitated, they gang raped her. They took pictures of her. And when she came to be, they said, "You belong to us now. If you tell your parents, we will kill them. We know who your parents are. We know who your grandparents are. We know all of this. If you tell anybody, we will kill you. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick you up every night, about midnight or so, and we're going to take you, and you are our slave, and you're going to sleep with men." And that's what they did for some time. And they would pick her up around midnight. She would be their slave and work for them from about 12 to 3 or so. And they would take her to anywhere from dingy motel rooms to mansions, and anywhere where there was a demand, they would supply this woman. And she'd be forced to sleep with them. And this happened for some time. Well, then sometime later, she was in a hotel room with about 6 or 7 guys. They raped her. They left, and her traffickers weren't back yet. and she just had a feeling they were going to come back and they were going to kill her. But she got to her senses. She started walking home, and as she's walking home, I think she's just aimlessly walking. A waitress saw her and realized she needed help, so she called the authorities. Authorities got involved and got her and her family to safety, and from what I understand, justice was brought to those traffickers. Devastating, horrific, almost life-stealing acts that was forced upon her. She started an organization called SOAP, Saving Our Adolescents from Prostitution.
Mm-hmm.
And what she does in Detroit is she'll talk with these motel owners and say, hey, I'd like to put these bars of soap in your showers, because on the soap there, it says, it has the hotline number that they could call to get help. Because lots of times women in this situation are not aware of what's going on, not aware that there's people out there who could help them. But yet there are. So that's their ministry that they do. So she turned something horrific, something evil, something just destructive into something where she's like, you know what, I'm going to make a difference, and I'm going to, I'm going to try and save as many women, young girls as I can from sex trafficking.
Mm. There are so many tragedies in that story. Not only what happened to this girl is absolutely horrific, but I think there are teenage guys in high school that are already caught in the world of being sellers of women, as it were.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's just astounding. I mean, when I was in high school, I was working at a movie theater. What are these guys doing already that they're raking in, no doubt, so much money by selling women? I mean, what has to happen to a guy to get to that level?
Yeah. And that's all the stuff that is underneath the surface. That's all the stuff that that sin is just compounded on. You look at the hurts of people. You look at why they're do what they do. I think we could go back and look at the hurt that has happened to them. There's this book with a phenomenal title called "Hurt People, Hurt People."
Mm-hmm.
So hurt people, and that's exactly true. And that's why you and I and the listeners are called to bring justice to where we are, to bring hope to wherever we go, to bring peace to wherever we go, to bring love to wherever we go, and to be aware. And in regards to sex trafficking and things like that, we've got to be aware of the signs of sex trafficking. And just, this is in my book here, some of the signs are of human trafficking are this: if someone's not free to leave or come and go as he or she wishes, is under 18 and is providing commercial sex acts, is in commercial sex industry and has a pimp or a manager, is unpaid, paid very little or paid through only tips, works excessively long and or unusual hours, is not allowed breaks or suffers under unusual restrictions at work, owes a large debt and is unable to pay it off, was recruited through false promises concerning the nature and conditions of his or her work. It's our job as followers of Christ to be aware of sex trafficking. I live in Orange County, and Orange County is one of the main hubs of sex trafficking all throughout the United States. More than LA County, more than Northern California, Orange County is the hub because people will pay top dollar for women that are their sex slaves.
Mm-hmm. Well, surely this is something that's an isolated incident. It's an exception. I mean, sex trafficking, is it really that common here in the modern Western America?
Yeah, I would love to say, no, it's not. It only happens in countries like that. But you look at all the studies done, and it happens right here in our backyard. A great website to go to is the Polaris Project, Polaris,
Mm-hmm.
Polaris, the Polaris Project. And you'll see statistics after statistics of all of this happening right here in our backyards. It is a multi-billion dollar industry, and sex trafficking is the world's second fastest growing crime. Mm-hmm. And it is something that we really need to take notice of and get involved with and be aware and know the signs around us, because if we don't, it's going to happen right underneath our nose. So 2 good websites I'll recommend. One is the PolarisProject.org, PolarisProject.org, PolarisProject.org. And the other one is called Stop the Traffic.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked earlier about pornography in the show, and there are some people out there who I'm sure would in no way want to support sex trafficking and be totally opposed to it, but unknowingly, if they're watching pornography, they could very well be supporting sex trafficking, couldn't they?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And there's many women who have come through the pornography industry and are speaking out against that, saying it is more common than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also remember that you talk about Trimper Longman. He wrote the book God Loves Sex with Dan Allender, I believe it is.
Yep.
And Dan was once with my father-in-law together, and they drove by a truck stop. And Dan said a little prayer, and he said, I always do that every time I pass by a truck stop, because that's where so much sex trafficking takes place.
Wow. Yep.
So,
wow.
What do you think someone can do if they're hearing this and they're either caught up in the whole sex trafficking thing where they're a victim of it, or they suspect someone they know is a victim of it?
Well, yeah, if you suspect someone is a victim of it, call the authorities. It is better to call the authorities and get their advice and have them involved than not. There was an instance where I had to do a welfare check on somebody, so I had to call the police. And a welfare check is when you think somebody is suicidal and you haven't heard from them. You call the police, they'll do a welfare check and go to the door. I haven't heard from her, and it's a long story, but long story short, I called the police, and she was fine. There was no issue and everything like that. But I do not regret making that phone call. She was embarrassed, and I guess I may have been a little embarrassed too, you know. But I do not regret it one bit, and I would do the same thing over again, because we need to err on the side of caution. So if you suspect someone's involved in human trafficking of any sort, call the authorities. I'd say also stop supporting the porn industry. Pornography desensitizes us to the horrors of sex slaves and the abuse of women. And pornography really dehumanizes people. That's what porn does. I'd also say get involved in human traffic organizations. Like I mentioned, Stop the Traffic. It's TRAFFICK, traffic. Stop the Traffic is how they spell it in the Polaris Project. And get involved with organizations like that, because they probably have chapters or groups right in your backyard. 3, create an awareness group. Create a small group about human trafficking in your area. Get a group of 5 or 10 people together who are committed to doing this. And there's curriculum online at these different websites. I mentioned the Polaris Project, Stop the Traffic, and even the International Justice Mission. It's another great one. They have curriculum too that you could use. And the fourth one, and this one isn't a trite saying, but pray. You know, how often, like you're saying, you know, Nick, that's a great example. Like, how often do we pray for the women and the boys in the human trafficking industry? Let's be praying for it. And if you are in this and you're involved in this and you don't know where to help, reach out to one of these organizations, the Polaris Project or Stop the Traffic. and or the International Justice Mission, and reach out to them and say, hey, I need help. I don't know what to do, and they will get help to you, and they will protect you, and it doesn't always have to be this way.
And what would you say now to the young man or young woman out there listening? They're not involved in sex trafficking or anything, but they're single, they're wanting to wait for marriage, they're still virgins at this point, and what message would you give them about sex?
Sex is amazing, and it is phenomenal, without a doubt. But it has its proper context, and you will do yourself a world of good. And I know it's difficult for you to think past this present moment, but as you think long term, when you make wise decisions now, it's only going to set you up for success in the future. Do all you can to make wise and good and honoring choices and decisions now, because you're going to set yourself up for so much success in the future. Many students I talked to made many mistakes when they were 15, 14, 13. And if they could go back and say, I would do it over again, most of them would say they would. But obviously they can't. And so what they do is they work through it. But if you're there and you haven't made these mistakes yet, continue making wise decisions. Continue asking God to give you wisdom. Continue surrounding yourself with a healthy community. Because when you do that, you're setting yourself up for success.
Well, Bryan, we've come to a time where we have to start bringing things to a close. Do you have a blog, a website, an email, or a way people can get in touch if you want to find out more?
Yeah, you go to my website. It's everyonelovessex.org. 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 It's a clean site, I promise. Just don't go to everyonelovessex.com. Just kidding. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So
at least not right now.
Yes, exactly. Everyonelovessex.org, and then on it, there's information, there's videos, informational videos about the topics that we've been talking about, and eventually there's going to be probably the next few weeks or so, I'd imagine, there's going to be a small group curriculum on there. If you wanted to read the book and go through it with the group, you could download small group curriculum, and it's a video curriculum. So you can read a chapter or two a week and then go over the content with using this these videos to help you walk through the process. So you can buy my book through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, online. It's in Lifeway Christian bookstores all across the nation. And if you're saying, man, this book sounds amazing, and you have a bookstore and it's not there, tell them they need to get it in stock. But everyonelovessex.org is the best way to get a hold of me. You can even contact me through that website, and you get my book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, so you can get it on the Kindle, you can get it on the Nook. I mean, you can get it in so many different forms.
Do you have any final message you'd like to leave today for the Deeper Waters audience?
God's ways, it's almost as if God knows what he's talking about.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, it's almost as if God knew what he was doing. And when we align with that, that's where fulfillment comes from. It doesn't mean everything's going to be easy and things like that, because I've done things God's way and things have gotten worse for me in terms of the, in terms of like situations that I was in at the time. Trying to live for God, do what's right, but things got worse. But in the long run, that's where fulfillment comes from. And even when I was in that situation, so just a quick example, I'll explain this. When I bought my condo years ago, this was 2006, so before the market crash, the first time. They I was gonna, they're like, okay, you could do a stated income loan or a non-stated income loan. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't making enough at the time to get a really low interest rate. But my credit score was so good that I could just say, oh, I make 150,000 or whatever it was, or whatever I put on it, and they wouldn't verify my income. And this is one of the reasons things went downhill. But and I would have saved like 2 or 3% on my mortgage, which would have saved me hundreds and hundreds of dollars every single month. But I decided to do the stated income loan. So, hey, here's what I make, and then they go, okay, thank you very much. Here's your 8.75% interest rate on a $236,000 condo, and it was a lot more money than the 6% or 5% interest rate that I probably would have got if I would have said I made a lot more money. So yeah, so that's what I mean. I wanted to honor God with that decision. It did, obviously affect me every single month because of it. And then a year later I refied, but I'll tell you what, I never regretted doing that. I never would go back to do it, because no matter what, we got to live our lives the best we can to honor Christ. Mm-hmm. And it's not always going to be easy, but that's our goal as Christians, is to honor Christ.
Mm-hmm. The book is Everyone Loves Sex on Amazon. The Kindle is $9.99. The paperback is $14.97. Bryan, I'd like to thank you for coming on. Hopefully we'll see you back here again sometime.
Nick, thank you for chatting with me. It's good chatting, and I'm really honored you invited me on.
And I can when next week we're going to have Dr. Michael Bird on talking about his book, Jesus, the Eternal Son. For now, I'm Nick Peters, and I'm signing off.